Thank you so much, Dr. Shiva, for all that you have just shared. It sparked so many things in my mind as an Indigenous woman to Turtle Island, AKA North America. And I really appreciate the examples you gave and the principles and the values that they gave. They align so strongly with what my elders have taught me. Before I get into it, I just want to introduce myself in the traditional manner, as is customary for my people. Which means greetings, my kin and my people. I come from the Nanisht Ejitachitni clan of the Diné nation. We're also incorrectly known as Navajo. On my father's mother's side, I come from the Southern Cheyenne clan. My mother's father is of the Salt clan of the Diné. My father's father is from the European clans. Taos, New Mexico, So I hail from Taos, New Mexico, what is now called Taos, New Mexico. And in that manner, I present myself as a Diné woman. So thank you for letting me do that to honor my ancestors. So some of the things you were talking about really struck me. Including how you kept using the time frame 10,000 years, that pretty much wherever you go on the planet, people have been actively cultivating biodiversity systems, which some people call food systems, in that place. And I've been working on my doctoral research for the past 4 years or so, and really looking into ways that this happened here on Turtle Island. And you hit the nail on the head. At least 10,000 years, I've been looking at water, fire, and earth. So the water is the fisheries. And we know in Chesapeake Bay, by looking at the shell middens and analyzing the age of these oyster shells, these fossilized oyster shells, that Algonquin nations sustainably harvested oysters out of the Chesapeake Bay for 10,000 years straight. And not only that, but the oyster shells increased in size over that time. So they not only harvested continually the same species from the same estuary for 10,000 years straight, ate it and threw it in this shell compost pile for 10,000 years, but they actually augmented the size of this relative. We don't call it food, we call it a relative. And I know that size doesn't always equate nutritional value, as you were saying. Sometimes our smaller corn that we grow in the desert has much more nutritional value than these big old corns, that they sell in the markets. But the fact that this shell size was augmented was interesting to me. You also have the clam gardens of the Pacific Northwest, whereby people would create these stone intertidal walls, such that, here's the intertidal wall. Whenever the tide would come up, it would fill this upper area with water and sand and then recede. And so all the clams would hang out right here on the land side of the wall. And they would actually grow and house many different species of clams where there was none before. So just by the simple implementation of these rock walls, they created whole clam gardens. And then, on the fire side, you mentioned wildfires. I love that it's not actually a wildfire. This is a man-made fire. There's a really wonderful book called Forgotten Fires, which details all of the ways that Indigenous peoples did controlled burns in North America. And what we're finding is evidence is mounting that we didn't follow the buffalo followed our fire. Because in the Miamia Nation, for example, who is indigenous to present-day Ohio, their lunar calendar, the September moon is the grass-burning moon, because every September they would burn the grasses, which would transform those expired plant tissues into ash, which would rejuvenate the soil. Many species became pyroadapted such that they couldn't really survive without these fires. And in the wake of these fires would be these nutrient-dense grasslands. And who loves nutrient-dense grasslands but bison, deer, elk, other ungulates who would really come in the wake of these fires. And you mentioned California. I have a really dear friend. He's the chairman of the Amamutsan Nation, Val Lopez. And he said, Lyla, our cultural way, and this is Indigenous peoples of Santa Cruz, California. He said, our cultural way is to have 13 trees per acre. And these are all food trees, acorn trees, hazelnuts, what have you. And so he said, in between we would burn. And now I look out on my land, he said, and I see 300 trees on an acre, 400 trees on an acre, and they're all competing for limited nutrients, water, sunlight, and they're choking each other out. And they're exacerbating the drought engendered by the climate crisis. So what do you have when you have a bunch of sick, dried out trees close together is a tinderbox. And Santa Cruz caught fire very badly in recent years. And then onto the soil, and I'd love to hear anything you'd like to share on this, there's many examples I wish I had time to give, but one of the cool examples is the Zuni, which is my clan, actually, if you go back far enough, the Diné intermarried with the Zuni. But here in the deserts of New Mexico, we would position our fields at the base of small watersheds. And these watersheds on the upland slopes had juniper and pine forests. And so every monsoon rain, we would kind of catch the water flow that would come down, and we would catch all the phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium in the soil from these upland slopes that was sort of continually being rejuvenated by these forest ecosystems into our fields. So some of these fields were cultivated for thousands of years in the same place, and they never imported outside fertilizer or water in the middle of the desert. And we grew and still grow beautiful corn, beans, squash that are highly nutritious. And so Indigenous peoples have often been portrayed as these nomads eating hand to mouth, trying to eke out a living on the land. But what my research and many other people's research, and what you have so eloquently stated, Dr. Shiva, is saying is this narrative not only denigrates Indigenous peoples, but it's just inaccurate. We cultivated every acre of this continent very intensively and helped to bring out, I thought I heard you say farming biodiversity. I'm not sure if you said that, that's what I heard. We were farming biodiversity, augmenting habitat, creating places for our relatives to live, and we would feed our food, and our food would feed us in a nice cycle. And so that's what I'll end with there for now, is just, Indigenous peoples were not, bands. This was not terra nullius. We were densely populating the land and managing it extensively. And you're welcome to share anything you'd like to share on that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lyla. I think there are four false narratives that have been played out to justify colonialism, to justify industrial agriculture, which I call chemical warfare, because it's based on the war chemicals of Hitler's labs and the poison cartel that pushes it. Comes from there. The first is, for these thousands of years, these were Bushmen, they were primitive. Primitive means the original people. It doesn't mean backward. That is a colonial interpretation of the term. So they just made us disappear as farmers. And reclaiming our farming is part of the resurgence of the Indigenous. And the beauty of the Indigenous is we farmed diversity of the land, but we farmed cultural diversity. We didn't have to destroy our identities to conquer. And that means cultural and biological diversity get regenerated when we regenerate our Indigenous systems. The second very false narrative is agriculture has always been destructive. No, look at Indigenous agriculture pre-colonialism. It has not destroyed anything. Industrial farming, colonial farming, globalized trade in agriculture is destructive. The third, that industrial farming produces more food, yield per acre. That's what I've shown. But yield of a commodity leaving the farm without measuring its nutrition doesn't tell you anything. The state of the land, the state of the biodiversity, the state of the farmer, the state of the people who eat, that's the true measure. So we measure nutrition per acre. And then the fourth false narrative really is only we have technology. Nature has no technology. Indigenous people have no technology. Women have no technology. We have technology. But all that technology means is a tool. We have evolved tools of farming. Nature has evolved tools of life. When I talk about the green leaf and photosynthesis, there is no technology more sophisticated. And the beauty is it creates abundance without pollution. It is negative entropy. Negative entropy means it actually takes energy and consolidates it into organized form, whereas all fossil systems, all industrial systems take fossil energy and then create pollution. That's what climate change is about. It's not just about the fuel, it's about the mindset, the mechanical mind. And while you were talking, I just so love the fact that we have forgotten that so much food comes from trees. You talk about, we in Navdanya have regenerated forest foods. And with the tribals, tribals didn't cultivate the land except maybe a patch of 1%, 2%, 3%. The rest were all wild fruits. And they protect the forest as a food source. And I think something else that is happening in our times, and maybe we can turn to this in the next round of discussion, is the colonizers divided humans from nature. The new colonizers are continuing to divide humans from nature and saying that's wild, and this is technology. But the richest biodiversity areas are those inhabited by indigenous people. On 25% of the land that has been left to them, they are conserving 80% of the biodiversity. That is not wilderness, as you mentioned. This is cultivated diversity. So we got to get out of the idea of wilderness, and we got to talk about cultivated richness of biodiversity through conservation and production becoming under one, and an ecological apartheid of constantly separating and dividing. And the sad thing is, a lot of the false solutions to climate change are coming from this nonsense of rewilding. We, the white Kaiser, will rewild the world by taking over your land. This is the new false recipes. Maybe we can spend some time talking about it now.
Yes, I think wilderness is a concept that facilitates colonization because it assumes that there were no people there. And perhaps understandably, when Europeans came to this land, it was foreign. They saw things they never saw before, but they also always noted it looks like a park. It looks like a finely manicured park. And by that time, many of us, by the time they started writing history about this land, many of us had already been wiped out by disease. And so, yes, I think that, wilderness is a way of saying there's no one here. It's okay if we take the land. Or there was nobody here, so it's okay that we took the land. And no, it is not wilderness. And we are not divorced from nature, as you said.
And we are cultivators. We are cultivators. So the new food summit that's being planned is actually taking colonization to the next step of extinction. The same poison cartel that has given us disappearance of species and the cancers, and they control both big pharma and big food and big biotech, are joining hands with big tech. And they've hijacked the United Nations system where one country had one vote. So the tiny island nations, the poor African nation, could stand with the United States and say, this is the right way to do farming. This is the just solution to climate change. They've been wiped out. Gates is now running the hijacked summit. He's appointed the lady who runs this alliance for the food, Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa. And if you look at the sessions, there's a fake food session run by a forum, which has, which is called Eat Forum, joining with a group called Fresh, which is all the corporations for junk food and fake food, and now lab food. And then you have another on new technologies and digital agriculture. What is digital agriculture? Same poisons spread faster through drones and spy satellites and farming without farmers. So they're talking about farm-free food and farming without farmers, and wanting to use land to produce raw materials like the colonial times, except now it isn't cotton for the cotton empire. It is proteins and carbohydrates for lab food. And Silicon Valley has invested billions in order to make trillions out of this. So every person who is listening to this forum should join the movement for seed freedom and food freedom. If there's one thing we need to do is grow our own food and create gardens of hope. If we are indigenous people, we need to take the land back. If we are young people wanting to fight climate change, put the carbon back into the soil as living carbon. And no matter who we are, if we want to live on this earth with a future, we must all unite to fight the fake food summit for fake food, fake economics that will make the old colonization look like a luxury. Because this is about wiping out humanity. The terra nullius wiped out indigenous people. This food summit recipes are wiping out humanity. And I think we need to unite around food, around sacred food and the blessed earth. Thank you.